Hi, this is Riaz from Networks Learning. Welcome to Cisco Next Generation Firewall Training. In this video, we will have an overview on Cisco's Next Generation Intrusion Prevention System. Basically, this is an entire separate engine inside the FTD, which provides the IPS functionality, and this is the top-notch NGIPS functionality based on Snort engine inside the FTD. So if we compare FTD with the legacy firewall, the legacy IPS system, that is IPS with ASA, only work on signatures. You have signatures, and the IPS engine works on signatures. Here in this FTD, the next generation intrusion prevention system can work based on applications, protocols, users, vulnerabilities, and more advanced. It is context aware. It is more. It has the more capability to uh, to analyze your network, and based on the analysis it can provide you the recommendations, and it can provide you the suggestions that you should deploy the rules according to its suggestions that require on that are required on your network. Basically, IPS has two kinds of deployments: in passive mode and inline IPS. uh, the working methodology of next generation IPS is made up of two things. We have two things behind the IPS engine. One is the normalization engine, and normalization engine is just a process of inspecting packets and looking for certain anomalies in performing basic checks. For example, stream fragmentation, reassembly, checksum, protocol specific checks, etc. The component that is dealing with the normalization is called the preprocessor engine, and normalization also also detect the attacks as well. And preprocessors are controlled by the network analysis policy. You can see over here we have intrusion policy, we have network analysis policy. So the baseline of intrusion prevention system inside the FTD is two things. That is, one is the normalization, and the other one is the IPS rules, intrusion prevention rules. Normalization is just a word, and it is a mechanism that will check the traffic based on the certain types of rules. It will check the streams, it will check the protocol, it will check the fragmentation, reassembly. All these checks are made at normalization engine, and normalization is controlled by preprocessors. you know we have normalization engine, we have preprocessors, then the under the preprocessor we have the network analysis policy. At network analysis policy, you can basically specify the types of network, the nature of devices, the nature of users, the nature of protocols, ports on your network, and specifically you can define which traffic needs to be passed, and which traffic needs to be inspected from the IPS engine. Currently, we have Snort 2 and Snort 3 version, and Snort 3 is the latest version for IPS, and Snort 2 is the previous version. So inside Snort 2 version, you can define and you can fine tune the network analysis policies. And the network analysis policies will be integrated with the IPS rules. I will show you over here that how all this works in an integrated environment. We have network analysis policy, and network analysis policies are integrated with the IPS rules, and IPS rules and IPS policies are integrated with access control policy over here. So in advanced tab, we have network analysis and intrusion policies. When you click over here, we have a default network analysis policy. You can see over here balance security and connectivity. We have multiple action based multiple network analysis policies, and based on these policies the rules are applied accordingly. if you apply the network analysis policy with an action of maximum detection, then all your IPS rules will be activated. If you configure it security over connectivity, you can give preference to either security, or you can give preference to connectivity as well. So these are the rules, these are the actions that define the network access analysis policy, and based on network analysis policy, actually the rules are activated inside the IPS engine. So I will show you what are the functionalities of each of these rules. And you can also have network analysis rules, custom rules. So if you have multiple network analysis policies based on different subnets, based on different applications, based on different users, you can have separate network analysis policies, and you can integrate them with different intrusion policies as well. Currently we have a single one. If you have multiple network analysis policies, I will show you the what are the contents of network analysis policy, and based on network analysis policies you can configure multiple intrusion policies as well, and these intrusion policies can further be integrated with individual access control policy rule as well. So here we have add rule. We can say that inside zone, outside zone, we can define networks, and in network analysis you can define which network analysis policy to be applied over here. So in this way you can create multiple rules over here if you have multiple network analysis policies. So this is also provided over here. The one thing which I would like to explain to you, we talked about network analysis policy, we talked about intrusion policy, network analysis rules as well, and now I'm going to brief you about network policy variable sets. So how does IPS works? Normally IPS works on what we call the signatures. IPS engine has different variable sets. What we call the objects over here. Normally we make objects with the value of IP address, with the value of port address, that are called our objects. But in IPS we call we call it as a variable. We have variables and we have values against these variables. Similarly, like we have objects and we have values against those objects, like IP address or port address, etc. So how does the IPS engine works based on variables? The variables are also referred as snort variables. The snort rules or the IPS rules work on variables rather than actual IPs or ports. A snort rule can be considered as an object with a value. These objects are used in the rules as variables. Let me show you where you can see these variables that are used by the snort engine and IPS engine. Here we have policy sets variables. You can either search variable set. Yeah, here are these variables. We have a default set. These the values inside these sets are used by the snort engine for IPS policy. You can see over here homenet is usually defined with what you have at inside zone, at inside your zone, and one is called home, and one variable name is external. External is used to define the outside network, and home is used to define the internal network or your secure network. Let me show you here the external net. You can see over here this is the default variables, and inside default variable we have a variable name of external net. External net means your external network or the public network. or what we can call as an outside network, and we have a home underscore net. This is referred to as your internal network. So these variables are used by the snort rule for IPS services. We have SSH servers. This is also it has a value of home net, and we can have GTP ports, we have HTTP ports, we have HTTP servers. All these belongs to the home net. So these are the variables that you need to define, and inside the snort engine, the IPS engine specifically work based on these variables and their corresponding values. These objects are used in the rules as variables. This is done to allow the use of rules in any environment without modifying the object. Instead of you may change IP address ports in these objects. So basically we can create custom rules based on these using these variables, and instead of using the signatures we can add IP addresses as well, and these you can use these objects globally if you have multiple domains inside the FMC, and you can apply those objects globally without taking care of the underlying values assigned to them. You can change the value, but you do not have to change the variable name instead, and you can use it inside your FTD for snort variables. And these IPS rules are written with the external suspected networks as source and home network trusted network as a destination. So how the IPS rules how the IPS rules are deployed, or how does they work, basically let me show you again. The snort inside the snort engine, the home net, which is called the internal network, this network is defined as a source, and external network is defined as in it's the reverse. It's the reverse in snort engine for IPS. The home network is defined as a destination, this one, and the external net is defined as the source. Inside the if I can have a look over the snort rules, you can see over here intrusion, snort 2 version. The point which I want to make you understand is this: the deployment of IPS rules will work with your north-south traffic very well, but the IPS rules will not work if you are deploying firewall in the data center with east-west traffic. For east-west traffic, it will not work with the default configurations that you have in your IPS policies. You need to modify them. The point which I would like to explain you is this: the IPS rules are written with external suspected networks as source, external network which I showed you in the object section with the source, and home net as trusted network as destination. So the traffic when coming from the outside network, these rules are activated, and the traffic is monitored, and IPS rules are applied. The reason behind is this: the IPS engine works on traffic that is coming from the public IP address as source and going to the private IP address to your internal network as a destination. It will work very well with the north-south traffic when you are deploying the FTD with an IPS functionality on your internet edge layer. However, if you are deploying the firewall in the data center you have the private IP addresses. These rules won't work on traffic that is initiated from the private IP addresses and going to the private IP addresses. So in that case, you will have to modify the default policy and fine tune the rules accordingly. So let me show you the rules over here. You have rule state, and you can have classification, vulnerabilities. Let me disable this one. Policy information, and inside policy information you have multiple things. This policy is up to date, and this policy has 3 enabled rules, and rules generate events, 3 rules generate events. Basically these are the rules that are applied against this. Actually I want to here click on this one and click on show details. So you can see over here, this is the rule: alert message internal event coming from the internal session address, event session address said, and this is the rule which is written in C language. So all these rules are written in C language, and I would like to show you the internal or external difference between what I have explained to you over here, or in my next video I will let you know. However, let me disable this filter first. So this is I have found this one of the rule. It says that alert TCP $homenet. Homenet is the internal net. If traffic is coming from internal net, import any and going to external net over HTTPS ports. Message app detect absolute software compute outbound connection search dnssearch.org flow to server established content. This is how the rules are initiated. And when we talk about the traffic coming from outside, then this would be in destination, and the external net will be in the source section. So basically the working functionality of the IPS rules is based on the private and public IP address. When traffic is coming from private IP address and going to private IP address, the rules won't work. But when traffic is coming from public IP address and going to private IP addresses, these rules are initiated, and this is the default condition. You can modify this according to your need, and you have to change some of the settings inside the IPS engine. One thing which I have explained to you is the network analysis policies. Network analysis policies are under the what we call the preprocessors, and preprocessor, on top of preprocessor we have normalization. We call this as normalization, and the second part is the IPS policy. Inside IPS policies we have IPS rules as well. We can create multiple rules inside the IPS policy. Intrusion rules control the SNOT engine rules that are used to inspect network traffic. What it does, and what does it mean, that the intrusion rules, these are the intrusion rules which are defined over here. Policy base, the base policy set up today, rule update this one. It is specifying this one. Intrusion rules control the SNOT engine. These rules are used to control the SNOT engine. These are the rules. We have thousands of rules over here. This says that you have 45,049 rules over here, and 0 is selected currently we haven't deployed any rule, and we haven't configured any policy, so that's why it is not showing us the applied rules in the policy as well. So intrusion rules control the SNOT engine rules. These rules will control the SNOT engine rules that are used to inspect the network traffic. So network traffic inspection is happening at the snort engine. So the snort, inside the snort engine we have the IPS section, and to control the IPS rules we have the intrusion rules. So we fine tune these rules. These rules will be applied to the snort engine rules. Snort engine will take action based on these configured rules, and these rules are specifically written in C language. And these, there are two types of rules we have inside the FTD, and one type is called the shared objects, which are written by telos, and we cannot rewrite them, we cannot edit them. They are written by telos in the C language. And one other type of rule is called the standard rules, which are clear in clear text rule. And we will create a clear text standard text rule, IPS rule, and we will deploy it in our FTD to test the IPS engine. You can add your own rules. You can create your own rules as well. So you can create your own rules as well. So let me show you where you can configure your own intrusion rules. The default written rules, which are called the shared objects, are based on C language and written by the telos in C language. You can see over here I have clicked on to edit this rule. You can see over here some of its details, that the messages app detect and classification, action, protocol, source IPs. You can see over here, this is my home net. Home net means my internal network, and destination IPs mean external net. So this is how you can configure. And let me show you where you can create your own custom rule. You can just click on create rule. You can give the name, message, what message should be displayed when the IPS engine detects this kind of condition, or it matches with this kind of condition in the IPS engine in on traffic inside the FTD. You can classify it according to your requirement. You can define an action, alert, pass. You can define protocols. You can define direction as well. Remember that we don't have a drop action over here. So these are the rules. Inside the policy, you define what to do with the traffic that is matching with this condition. You will alert, but you will also get an action against the traffic that is matching this condition. So inside the IPS policy, you will define the action there. So based on this, we have default policies used as baseline for a custom policy for network analysis. Let me show you inside the intrusion. We have network analysis policies, and currently the base policy is selected as balance, security, and connectivity. The different intrusion policies are provided over here, and where you can control these policies, you can have, and you can change these policies, baseline policies, from the access control policy advanced tab. I think so. We have network analysis intrusion policies. Click on this one, and from here you can select the base policy, default network analysis policy. You can define balance security conditions. You can define connectivity over security, maximum detection, or you can create your own created network analysis policies. Based on this network analysis policy, your IPS policies will be evaluated. In network analysis policy, you define the networks, you define the ports, you define the some kind of traffic, your source, your network operating systems, your network types. So all these are the analysis policies. Based on these analysis policies, then further rules are applied, and the FTD can recommend the possible rules that you should apply on your network in order to take advantage of the IPS engine, or you can deploy your complete network IPS rules as well. So what I would like to show you over here is the rules section, policy action, base policy, and you can also click on this. No recommendations have been generated. You can force the firepower to recommend for you, but for recommendation purpose you need to enable the discovery policy first. So once the FTD will discover your network, your applications, your users, your operating systems on the network, it will then recommend you with what rules needs to be deployed on your network at IPS engine. Inside network analysis policy, you define the what needs to be. So this is kind of advanced features targeted for expert users only. This gives you a warning as well. So this is the critical configurations that are performed at FTD via EFM. So these are the settings. Inside network analysis policy, you can configure what traffic to be inspected and what is the baseline policy, and you can define your own custom settings for this for network analysis policy. You can define the what kind of policy should be deployed, and policy based on the operating systems running in your environment, based on HTTP configurations, with the default setting, with any kind of information that you are working and dealing inside your network. You can fine tune the IPS network analysis policy, and based on that network analysis policy the FTD can recommend you the rules that needs to apply for the IPS engine. So these are some of the settings that you can configure, and in policy layers you will see the difference and the change that you are making against the base template. you know Here we have selected Windows 7, 8, Windows Vista, and based on your networks, and you can also provide here the targets that on which networks and which IPs this policy should be applied and this network analysis policy should target. So based on different requirements, you can configure multiple network analysis policies, and you can deploy them inside the access control policy advanced tab in the rules section of the tab which I showed you previously. So if I would like to summarize this discussion, so basically in order to apply the intrusion policy, you have three things that you need to consider. First, you need to discover the network. You should have a discovery policy on your network, so that the you know the it should know the FTD should have the clear picture about what is happening on your network and what resources are being utilized, and who are the servers, and who are the users who are taking benefit of your network. So I have a configured a network discovery policy already. I am taking I have discovered inside subnet, IT subnet, outside subnet. Based on these subnets, it will discover users, it will discover operating systems, it will discover devices and all things. Secondly, we have this one is the prerequisite. The other three conditions that needs to be configured for a proper intrusion policy services is the network analysis policy. You can go from access control policy. From access control policy, you have network analysis policy. You can go over there. You can define your network analysis policy, or you can use the default and network analysis policy as well. Inside network analysis policy, you define what you need to target, what you need to discover, which networks you need to be you need to apply policy on. So these are settings you can define over here. And the second thing is the intrusion rules. Inside intrusion policy, you have the intrusion policy. Inside intrusion policy, you have the intrusion rules as well. So these rules can be recommended by the firewall based on the network analysis policy, and network analysis policy will fetch the information from the discovery policy. Based on that, you have intrusion rules. Intrusion rules can be deployed in two ways. One, it can recommend the firepower can recommend for you based on the network analysis policy. A recommendation can be in four different ways. Either the firepower recommendation rules recommend threshold by rule overhead. If you want to apply rules, all the rules on your IPS engine, you can consider these settings to be high. You know. This is the condition that you can specify over here based on the performance and based on the security conditions that you want to deploy in your network. Low means that you want to configure rules, but you don't want to consume much power on your firewall. The Cisco recommends this setting to be either medium or to either low, but it is not recommended to keep this setting to a high value, because at high value your CPU will not work properly and you will have severe kind of CPU consumption over here. So it can generate the recommendations of the rules that you should apply on your network based on the vulnerabilities, based on operating system, based on end systems that are running on your network. I should leave over here. One more thing which I would like to show you over here is the you can see over here the different kinds of devices that are running on your network. So you can fine tune this network analysis policy based on your requirement. We have latest last Cisco iOS, BSD, Linux, Unix, Windows operating system, and Mac operating system. So based on this, based on your requirement, you can fine tune these network analysis policies, and network analysis policies can be defined multiple in multiple NAP policies can be defined at intrusion policies, and you have intrusion rules inside intrusion policies. So the second part was the intrusion rules you can define over here, and the third part comes to integrate all this IPS with the access control policy. Access control policy is the mother of all policies, and every other policy is integrated with it. So you can integrate the IPS policy with any rule over here. So we have the this is general rule INET access. We can integrate the IPS policy over here, and at this section we can configure RGS IPS policy, or we can configure the system provided policies as well. So in next section we will cover the lab environment, and we will test the test in IPS custom IPS rule with the and we will declare that as a malicious or as an intrusion event on our FTD, and we will initiate a traffic from our inside network, and we will test what happens on the FTD. So this was the complete brief of the IPS engine on the FTD with next generation intrusion prevention system. So hope you understand this information, and I will be covering the lab again for the IPS in the next section. Thank you so much.